Get this thing on the lift and pull the suspension out and under it.
You gotta love that sound. Restoring this barn find.
Wow, doesn't it make you dream about what this thing's going to look like? Red?
Oh yeah, it's getting restored.
So get it completely gutted, get it on the rotisserie, and then start blasting it and cleaning it up.
The GT500 had arrived in Jeff's trailer to Jason White Customs and Restorations in Hereford, Texas. A real Shelby. We rolled out of this barn in Nebraska just a few weeks earlier. This car had been parked for 41 years. We needed lots of parts, especially an engine.
Don't be scratching my paint.
The original 428 Police Interceptor, high priority. Where was it? Under all this stuff, here's what we didn't find. Oval air cleaner, dual fours, Cobra Le Mans finned valve covers. Maybe those parts are in the barn somewhere. Most of the parts that had been removed from this Shelby were upstairs. It was pot luck what we'd find. All kinds of Shelby treasures up here.
Did the mice get in the carpet?
Yes. It's an original.
Spent an afternoon and the following morning digging them out. But no trace of an engine or a 4-speed transmission, a Shelby fiberglass hood. This old car had been apart since the early 80s. Our job, pick up the pieces, restore this car back to the way it was new. And that might look impossible, but I had a great shop lined up to do the restoration. What I really liked about this shop is Jason had a paint booth, and this old Shelby was going to need paint and body work for sure. Needed both rear quarters, and over half of this restoration turned out to be paint and body. Body and paint. And it's pretty hard to separate those two. Look at these factory spot welds. Beautiful. Just right for these panels. This Jason White might still look 25, but he's got 25 years experience. A master craftsman here at work. And one more thing. When a restorer collects cars of the type he restores, like this 390 GT Coupe that I featured in Mustang Monthly, that means he has a passion for these cars. And that's the kind of person we want working on our cars. A Jason White.
What do we got here?
This is my 68 GT Fastback. It is an original GT car. I bought this in 94, stored it in 99.
What was it like when you got it?
It was actually in pretty decent shape. It needed quarter pounds.
Our 67 Shelby needs quarters. Same body. So, what are you going to do when you find your dream car in a barn? You make a run at it. Buy it. And to me, this was going to be far more exciting than buying a car restored. And if you'd like more of this type of content, can you hit that like button and subscribe? What about the bones of this Mustang? I mean, I thought it was excellent shape as far as rust. Therefore, I thought the restoration would have a better outcome. What about the floor pans? How do they look?
The floor pans look terrific once we get them blasted and cleaned up. No bashed in spots, no rust.
How rare is that?
That's super rare these days. Very rarely do you ever see a front board that isn't gone from the cow leaking.
But you said that the floorboard on the driver's side over here had been replaced?
It'd been worked on. Yeah, it actually has a weld seam. It needs to be fixed better. That's an older reproduction floor pan, so the detail in it's not very good.
Well, we had a problem in the cow area with mice, right?
Here's what they were talking about, the rust on the cow. It's a sweat rust. It's not bad. It'll be easily blasted and cleaned. These were either coupe quarters and I spliced them in, or they were complete fastback quarters and they cut them and spliced them in. As you can see right in here, you can see the spot welds. That's where they seamed it in on that side.
Both quarters had body seams with body filler that you're going to see after media blasting.
What about the trunk?
Oh, this is nice and straight. It's never been hit in the rear. All the tail panels straight. Yeah, it's the original Shelby roll bar. Those belts mount up to here for the 2-point harness that comes down. It's got the original pad on it and everything. No cracks in the wood at all. Yeah, it's got a plastic lamination in there. Just fill it back in. I mean, it costs like $2,000 to refinish this thing. And we could save a lot of money restoring it ourselves. Super straight roof. Not a dent in the roof. This door has been replaced, but with a NOS door at that time. It was probably replaced back in the 80s. That door over there is original. And looking on the inside, there's no caved in spots, so it ain't full of Bondo or nothing. Got a big old mouse nest down in there.
Would you say this body's rust free, or?
Yeah, it's every bit of rust free. No indication of towing like usually. They usually have bends and stuff on the strut towers. Is through here where they hook chains and yanked on it. This also has the original sway bar in it. Yeah, 1 inch, which is his Shelby piece. It's got the original gearbox. The 428 was mandatory power steering, optional power brakes. The battery tray area of the Lance is perfect. No pitting, no nothing. Yeah, 90% of the time all this area in here is gone. Cow panels in good shape. Oh, what's nice is all this is straight. The crumple zone's right here, not kinked. All this is straight, not bent up. It's got all the original spot welds. Damaged, but it's all been blasted. All the black is gone. You can see right here where they cut that out to put those grease zerks in those upper control arms. So I'll have to grind all that up and clean it up. The other side, they didn't cut them out. But they start squeaking and they'd always cut them out and put grease zerks. The firewall is super nice. No dents, no bends, no rust. Looks like they had bought Comfort Weave upholstery at one time. But the mice got into it.
So you got all the belts?
Here's the roll bar belts. They function properly and everything. No rust in them. These will probably clean up. These will have to be restored. These are the original lap belts. Problem with these, they have a lot of rust. Yeah, we'll send them off to a company and they'll replate them, rebelt them, put the labels back on just as original. With the FOMO code with the date code of 67. The back half has been worked on and primered. That's got this dent right here. Be an easy fix, but that'll pull out super easy. Here's the scoops, uppers, lower. This would have been cut out and I attached a hose to this for the rear brakes if you wanted to make it functional, or these were non-functional. There's original quarter panel end cap. Got both of those. They're there. It looks like both of the upper scoops are there. This was missing a stud, which you can fix that easy. These end caps. Seen cars and they'll sometimes fit like that, sometimes they'll be like that. But to actually look like you can achieve it flush is pretty nice. Of course, you can kind of see the crude, how it kind of fits above the quarter.
We rejected several 1967 authentic Shelby hoods because they needed too much work. Instead, we chose a reproduction hood. Looked like a brand new original.
This hand-laid fiberglass?
Yeah, this is hand laid, which would have been how it would have been originally.
Yeah.
Not the original deck lid. Here's the original antenna. Here's an original hood pin. That's the original Shelby part right there. Here's the other one. These were extended out. The bumper brackets were extended out. See where they welded an extension onto them. That's the original nose piece. This is a good 3 inches when the normal Mustang would only be about 3/4 of an inch. This was a reinforcement for the nose. The Shelby only piece. This is where the license plate goes. But then it was screwed right up under that lower Lance piece and gave it some support. Not so much further. And of course this was right here. These held your inboard lamps, and this is just a regular Mustang piece right here, and added this bracket, triangular bracket with the headlights. Here too. What's nice is this is the original. It had never been replaced. It should have a chrome. It's actually an aluminum molding that goes around that, bright molding. So these were a non-sequential.
It's not broken?
No. The lens got one crack in it. We can get a new lens. A nice piece. And this could be restored. It's got the auto light. You could send this off and have it replated. Use the original one.
And go figure, that old car sitting on that concrete floor in a barn for 41 years in Nebraska? Could it be rust-free? Huh? Of course, we're talking about a very good barn that doesn't leak. When removing the suspension, our first big question was, is the carrier inside the rear axle housing original for this car? Shelby people had been telling us that every 67 Shelby was cast SPEC, except the one in our car has a date code instead of spec.
The spec rear end should be identical to this, other than right there it says spec. 2F6. The F is the month and the 2 is the day. Book here shows day 2.
Oh, and F is for June and 6 for 1966. Precedes the build date of the car, so it works. Now we'll pull that rear axle.
The odds of it ever being changed, like why would you change out a rear end out of a Shelby?
And check the part number inside that carrier. So first, what's the part number inside that spec
And then
case?
the part number is on the inside, so you have to pull the rear end out, and it has the C4AW 4025-B, which is the nodular iron.
And then also, it looks the same, right?
Yeah, they're identical. They're the same. They have the same webbing, which is part of the nodular iron. Is the different type of webbing makes it a stronger housing.
So C4AW 4025-B is the part number we expect to find inside that carrier. Shelby's had 31 spline axles.
I usually put my finger out on one and just start counting them. 1, 2, 3, 1, 22, 23, 24, 25, 30, 31. 31 spline axle.
A regular Mustang would have 28.
C4AW 4025-B. It's a spec rear end.
Same part number and the same rear end.
It's a 5556AR. And what we're looking for is the AR. The AR is a heavier duty spring that the Shelby's had. A lot of them had a double A. This one has an AR. Right here, the snubbers. 67, they put these blocks in here to help with the axle hop and the wrap up of the spring. That's another good verification that it is an original Shelby. And those are reproduced, but they're like $370 a pair.
Are those good?
And these are good. They'll just have to blast them and clean them up. The base is a cast iron, and then this is actually a axle pinion snubber. They had replaced the quarter panels at one time. Due to rust, right here on the drop off, you can see it has some rust that they just kind of tacked it to the new quarter panel. I'll have to go back in there and cut that out, put a new piece in. I'll try to save this drop off because it's all relatively good other than the bottom lip. Yeah, this outer piece is the new quarter panel, and they tacked it in. And you can see they just barely tacked it here and there. There's like 3 little tacks, which is nice because it'll be easier to get off. Another interesting deal, it still has the import tie downs for shipping. One of them's still there. Usually the dealers would take those off. It has the original exhaust. Wow. It's in really nice shape. It just needs to be blasted and cleaned up. And of course somebody put these 1970s rake shackles on there to rake the rear end. So we'll get rid of those. And the exhaust hangers on the other side here. And right here you can see where somebody put the traction bar brackets on, and they actually brazed them on. I'll just take a muffler cutter and slice it off and grind that braze out. They actually did a better job on this side. Yeah, they brazed it here and across here. We can see that kind of gold color. I don't know why they'd use brass, but they did.
Now these springs, will we reuse these springs?
Yeah, well definitely, they're in good shape. They don't have that many miles on them really. So I'll take them all apart, blast them, put new clamps, put new anti-squeak pads in. A lot of guys, what they do is they actually keep the rear, this lower spring that has the part number on it, and they'll replace the upper springs with whatever they want and just put that on there to make it look like it's original. Another interesting deal is you can see where the undercoating has red paint over the undercoating. So they undercoated it and then painted over the undercoating, which we'll go back and replace that like it was. And then you can see it still has the factory blackout on a pinch weld.
Really?
And on these models, they were sprayed. The earlier model, like the 65s, it was brushed. And they sprayed that, and you can see where the overspray blacked out through there, and the overspray's right through here. So you can see that the whole bottom's been blasted.
In reference to the early 1980s restoration work.
This floor pan here has been replaced, and you can see where they seam sealed it through here, and they welded it in. So I have to take that out, and we'll have to fix that where it's butt welded. It won't have no seam there. You can see right through here, it's got the seam, and then they really wadded it up through this corner.
Oh, so it has to be fixed.
Yeah, we'll have to cut that out. And it won't be no big deal.
Okay.
What is nice about this car is the bottom of the frame rails. Usually these are all beat up really, really bad. And you can see this rust around this circle here. This is where the skids were from Ford. And they had these skids that came up and had a basically kind of like a big washer that they sat on when they ran them through the dip and everything and down the assembly process. You can still see some of the drips that they didn't quite blast off. Did have a little bit of rust right here. That's a commonplace. I just have to slice out a piece and put this little sliver right through there. This has a slight bend right through here. And it could have been from somebody jacking on it.
What's the hardest part about a restoration?
Usually rust in weird spots. Trying to fix stuff that's really bad rusted out. And we'll take these springs out next. Yeah. They probably took all this stuff out when they blasted the bottom. That's why these shackles and stuff are so loose. And tight. C7 ZA 55 6AR.
C7 is 67.
Yep. And the AR, yeah, you can, looks like a P, but it's an R. It's an AR 730 for the spring rate. Heavier duty handling springs. Hope when I blast this thing, I can get the blaster up in these frame rails and get all the mice nests blown out. The frame rails are full of mice nests. And it don't smell good at all. Yeah, this one you can see the AR. The R is stamped better. Yep, 5556 AR. We got matching original springs. These are 70s era tall shackles. original shackle bushing. Not in bad shape, but put some new ones in there. Has all the original suspension components. Got the correct brakes. Rebuild the brakes. These exact calipers.
You reuse those calipers?
Yeah, blast them, rebuild them. The discs are in really good shape. You can turn those. Got the correct springs, original Autolite adjustable shocks. They're just like a Coney shock. The big sway bar is still there. Still got a touch of the green paint from the inspection mark right there in the color code. Got all the power steering stuff, valve body, gearbox is all original. Of course, all these hoses will have to be replaced. No sense in trusting them, even though they are original.
And shock towers are all right?
Yeah, shock tower's all right. One little chain mark, extremely common for people that tow them. Fixed that fender. I pulled it out, actually filmed that. It took about 25 minutes to straighten it back out. It's a compressor. Press that spring. Most of the time I don't save these springs. I just take a torch and pop them. But since we're going to reuse these rare springs, a lot of them have spring helpers and they wore out because they've been on the road for 50 years. These were basically uncompressed. Didn't have no engine on them. These are going to be like new still. Yeah. That old insulator wasn't put in right from day one. There's one.
What about all this stuff here?
We'll have to take all that off. I'm gonna take the springs out first.
Got to get both sides out.
And then I'll start doing the brake, take the calipers and sway bar out. And then the last thing we'll take out is the control arms. Extension.
The other side not have a shock?
It was already taken out.
They're Autolite shocks.
Mm-hmm. Autolite CZ. There's the date code. Right here you can see it says firm, normal, and soft. T7B. 67. Let's see what the TB was. Let's see. February, which is B, and 67 per 7.
February is a couple months before the car was built, April 12th, 1967.
So it works.
It still works. You can still adjust it. The problem is it's got that seal in there. Who knows how long that would last. If you had a Trailer Queen show car that you're rolling on and off a trailer, then yeah, use them. But if you're going to drive it, I wouldn't use them. It'd be a nice piece you could restore and set next to the car or something, but I wouldn't use them personally. I like to drive stuff and push it. My luck, I'd be going around a curve and the shock would give out and you'd end up in a ditch.
The original Autolite adjustable shocks. Another surprise.
Did Shelby have to drill those holes for this?
They added those two little holes, and these would have looped around for the return line.
Amazing. A power steering cooler.
These are rare little piece. Say you're going to race it, and you're really steering it hard on a track or something, then you would want this. On the brake caliper bolts, they had a safety wire. They had holes in the bolts, had a wire that went through them, kind of like aviation stuff. Keep them bolts from coming loose. It's safety wire through it. Every time I bend it, it breaks. It's nice to keep a little piece of it. That way you know kind of what was in it, thickness wise. Safety wire. There's the holes that go through them. Kind of neat. Ooh, thing's gone. The pad has a little bit of the pad still left on it, but it's so thin, paper thin, and that one has a little meat left on it. You can tell they're the original old asbestos pads. Right there's the Kelsey Hayes logo.
Yeah.
That's the original caliper. Now we'll pull the other brake caliper off. We'll start pulling the spindle bolts out. Well, bushings are gone, rotted away.
That's on our list too.
Yep, got all that.
Jason wrote down the parts we needed to order. Seat covers? Yeah, anybody can order. But all that little stuff?
So you said you're going to take the whole assembly off here, right?
Yeah, I got the cotter pins stuck in there. I'm gonna have to probably drill them out. The top one's in the top control arm. Then those do not want to come out. They get rusty in there. Okay, I need a 9/16.
Sway bar coming out.
Sway bar is out. Shelby 1/8 sway bar. These do have the original brackets. They got these rolled edges here. You can get new bushings, reproduction bushings that'll fit. Still got bare metal in there, don't even have rust on it. Right here is one of the paint daubs I seen earlier. Yeah, a little speck of green paint code right there for assembly line. Different colors for different thicknesses.
That's the export brace.
Yeah, that's it right there. That's the new old stock one, which will have to be repainted. Got some surface rust and paint blemishes.
The steering, was that in it? The steering column?
The column, yeah, that's the column out of it.
What's this?
And then this is the brake assembly. You can see where the clutch pedal went through, and it was wore clean through the bushing and then started getting into the steel. So I have to take this out, put a new one of them bushings, and then weld up the hole. That's one of the dash, right-hand upper deluxe interior dash panel. You can see right here where the emblem was.
Which we found loose on the dash panel.
So we're gonna restore this one, put a paint stripper on it, get the old clear coat off, rebrush it, take a block and some sandpaper and go one way, and then clear coat it. It'll look like new again.
Strut rod next.
Yeah. Then we'll pull the steering knuckles off and pull the whole assembly.
There's the strut rod.
Normally I take the control arm off, take the spindle out. Most of the time they're greasy and nasty. Especially when they've been blasted, it rusted up worse than when they're all covered with grease. It's nice if they're covered with grease. Then you can get the parts apart.
Yeah, we're just lucky that the body's not rusted.
Yep. And that's loose. I got a big nut on the front right here.
Oh, up in there.
Yeah, sometimes they zip right off, sometimes they don't want to budge. That looks pretty clean. I think it'll zip right off. Take this up. Get that big nut off. I gotta get a big socket.
Well, it came out.
Yeah, all new bushings. Got to replace all these old cracked bushings. Yeah, we got all them on the list.
Well, you make sure and replace that so you find it, huh?
Yep. Kind of keeps your parts organized. Same way with the nuts.
You put everything back.
Kind of holds it when you blast it too. Then you can take the parts off and detail them to get them clean. Yeah, these will have to be blasted. These were actually bare metal originally. Okay, how are the steering knuckles? Pop 'em. When you hit it with a hammer like that, it mushrooms the threads. We're going to replace it anyway, so it doesn't matter. You always want to replace steering components. For safety's sake, this one still has a cotter pin in it. I got to try to get that one out. Usually want to keep the nuts. Sometimes you reuse the nuts. The new ones won't come with quite the right markings and stuff on them. So you can refinish that and use the nut if necessary. It's got one piece already missing. Might be easier just to break them off and drill it out. Get a hold of it. As if it was in the other way, I could use a punch on it or something. That thing's a little rusty. Does not want to budge. Okay. Pop it. That same cap is what they had up in the top knuckles, where people cut a hole in that shock tower to access to get that cap out and screw the grease zerk in. Does not want to budge. There it went. The ball joint nut for the lower control arm. Yeah, it looks clean.
Come off now when you hit it.
Well, I gotta undo this bolt here, and then that whole control arm will come off. These bolts here are called an eccentric bolt, and they have an offset oval. That's how you align the front end for the camber caster. This is the lower control arm eccentric bolt. This will drop out the lower control arm. Thing's got a lot of rust built up. Yeah, that's the eccentric bolt. Got a offset washer. Got a flat spot that washer fits on, and then this will rotate and it moves that control arm in and out for adjustment on the camber caster. Grown in there. Normally you want to take the spindle out before you do this, but when that cotter pin's grown in there, can't get them out. Lower control arm. Yeah, thing's full of dirt. These were black phosphated finish. You see that cotter pin right here?
That's the problem, though.
Yeah. Now that I got it twisted around, I might actually get to it a little easier. Usually take a torch sometimes and heat them up, and they just get rust on them. Sometimes spend more time getting the cotter pins out. You take the whole suspension out.
Coming out?
Yeah, it's coming out now. There. Coming out in pieces. Alright, got that one out. I got a trick for that.
What's the trick?
You can't get an impact up in there. You can run a suspension through there. That on there. Get it off that way. Yeah, getting rusty parts apart.
Another cotter pin there?
Yeah, those are the two I could not get to budge. Moving a tiny bit. Hook up. Doesn't want to come out. Smoke. Right on. Never had one that bad before. The punch. Sometimes they're kind of a pain to get out. I ain't never had one that.
Got it, huh?
Finally. Okay. Big hammer. The upper control arm nuts. It's our last piece of suspension other than the steering components. There's the control. You can rebuild these, but it is a pain. This nut here threads into the control arm. When you get that out, most of the time it eats the threads up. It's kind of like, most times it's easier just to buy a control arm. Brand new, don't have a pitting, no rust, assembled correctly. A lot of times they'll replace that ball joint, you grind those out and you'll replace the ball joint with bolts and you'll bolt it on. You gotta have somebody go in there and do the correct rivets, like factory. Feels like it's got rust in it. It feels kind of grainy inside. You see where the grease is coming out right here where they greased with the Zerk. What I'll probably do is we'll just take the steering off in one big chunk. Be the quickest, easiest thing.
No more cotter pins, huh?
No more cotter pins for now. There's one here that it's got grease all over it, so it's not rusted in. That'll be easy to get it out. These three bolts here for the gearbox, steering gearbox. And this bolt here and this bolt here hold this bracket. And this bracket's for the pivot push for the power steering. The idler arm, and that's the last suspension. So now we'll take the whole assembly down. Old steering assembly. Now we're ready for the rotisserie. We got a few little odds and ends stuff to take off. Like we gotta gut the doors later on, but we'll just get it on the rotisserie for now. Little stuff like grommets and stuff we gotta pull out. But for the most part, it's ready to blast. Rotisserie right behind the car over there. Go ahead and get all the rest of the trim off of it, grip rail molding trim, all that out of it, steering wheel. So get it completely gutted, get it on the rotisserie, and then start blasting it and cleaning it up. We got to put 2 quarter panels on it and 1 floor pan part, and then after that we'll start painting the bottom and putting the suspension back under it, doing body work, get this thing painted. Then we'll start the assembly process. All that should take about 3 months. Need an engine and all that good stuff. The total project should take 6 months.
Part 2 coming up. First thing will be to put the unibody on the rotisserie.